Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here then hi, my name is Miss Paris and I'm a newly qualified primary school teacher here in the UK. It has been, well it has felt like absolute ages since I have sat down and done a tips, advice / information video about your PGCE, but I am seeing more and more on social media kind of commonly asked questions that I thought it would just be beneficial to cover all in one place. So if you are about to start your PGCE in September, first of all, congratulations on getting your place. Second of all, this video might be one for you to watch all the way to the end because these questions come from different people, different places, and so you don't know what will be applicable to you. Now, a little disclosure before I start, I did a SCITT route, so although I was kind of affiliated with the university for my PGCE qualification, I never actually went to uni, I didn't have any lectures or seminars, so some of these answers might not be what actually happens when you start in September if you go the uni route, but if you go the SCITT route then this is most likely what will probably happen for you. So just wanted to say that before we get into the first question. So my first question is, what are the best things to do to prepare before the course starts? What I would do is really up your subject knowledge. So maybe you might know if you're going to go into Key Stage 1 or Key Stage 2 or Key Stage 3 or 4, but if you don't, it's best to make sure that you are familiar with the content that is provided by the national curriculum. Just make sure, okay, I understand what this bullet point means for Year 6. Alternatively, you know, make sure that if it's a maths bullet point in Year 1 that you would know how to explain that as well, because sometimes, and especially I found this going into Year 1, I was like, oh yeah, I know, of course I know how to add up, that's fine, but then you need to be able to explain that to the age level of the child. So I would just practice that, you know, make sure that not only can you do it but you can explain the steps. And if you can't do those things, make sure you practice lots of exercises in advance. To get my PGCE place, they gave me a previous maths paper, and there were loads of things that I kind of didn't forget how to do, but I forgot that was something that was taught in primary, so that might be worth you doing as well. There are also lots of CPD books in regards to spelling, punctuation and grammar, and also English terms. I mean, when you're fluent in English, it's easy to forget what a subordinate clause is, or you know, what an expanded noun phrase is, but you know, you might need to be able to teach that. So I would always look into the national curriculum. If you do know what year you are going to be teaching in, absolutely brilliant, really focus there. And then obviously when you're in secondary school, make sure that your subject knowledge is very good. If you are a bit worried about your behaviour management or you know, differentiation, or your knowledge on special educational needs, then it would also be good to maybe read a few articles on that. They don't have to be scientific journals. They could just be, you know, articles from reliable sources. You could also get some kind of teaching books. I do have a video all about where you can find teaching books for cheap, so if you do not want to go on Amazon and pay the £20+ for every single book, I will leave the link below so that you can try and see if you can get it at bargain prices. But those are some things. Look at the national curriculum, practice, you know, maths or English, make sure you know the names for things, especially if they're subject specific, like, I don't know, subordinate clauses, or a specific time in history if you're going to be a history teacher, or you know, a certain mathematical equation. You can tell I wouldn't be very good in secondary, but you know what I mean. As well as maybe reading some articles or books into behaviour management and special educational needs, that type of thing. Okay, another question, question 2. How did your first few weeks go? What can I expect? So I did another video on this as well. In the first week, it's not extremely stressful. It's very much about you settling in, building a relationship with the children. If you are doing SCITT and school directed, you're going straight into the school, really building that relationship with the children, observing the mentor, their teaching style, how their children react to them, you know, and picking out those children that you think, okay, once I start teaching, I need to make sure I'm on that child because they are a daydreamer, or I need to make sure that behaviour management wise, I keep those two apart because they never focus and they're always talking together. All these kind of things that once you're stood up in front of the class, it might be easier to miss. So when you're just sitting on the side, it's a really good opportunity to do all those kind of things. When you have training days, whether it's at uni or in your SCITT, you are going to probably expect a lot of introduction talks as well as icebreakers, getting to know kind of your colleagues around you. Not sure how it works now with COVID, but hopefully when you go into the school you still will be able to be introduced to the subject leaders, the DSL, you know, ELSA potentially, all these kind of little things as well that help once you're in teaching to know that you can gain support if specific situations arise. And then it really depends, but in your first week, for example, you might just observe, or if you're confident, you might end up maybe taking the morning or the afternoon register. You might settle them in the morning, or you might end the day with a little story time, just to get that confidence built up to being in front of 30 children or 30 teenagers. My understanding is that they're quite flexible in the first 2-3 weeks in terms of your workload, and then afterwards there's an expectation of, okay, you know, we need to start building this up, you need lesson observations. But in the first 2 to 3 weeks, I do think it depends on yourself, but you do need to push yourself a little bit. It is very easy to hold off on teaching for as long as possible. But yeah, just try. I mean, do a starter, or maybe you could split the class in half with your mentor. So they have half, you have half, or maybe you work with a specific group, a different group every lesson, just so you start to be in charge of a certain amount of children or the planning of a certain part of the lesson, that kind of thing. And eventually you will build it up. But I do think, unless it's very strict in your course, that there is flexibility there. So if you're really, really nervous, it could be built up a bit slower. Question 3, how can I help imposter syndrome when working with very experienced teachers? Oh, so it's a really good question, because obviously, like you said, they're experienced, so it's very easy to just be like, oh no, you know what you're doing, just go ahead. But you really need to kind of stick to your guns, and this is your time in your training year to really do things that are trial and error. You know, try something out. If it doesn't work, then, you know, it's a learning curve and you can know not to repeat it or change something the next time. And I think they need to be supportive with you in that. If they are very experienced, it's probably unlikely that you're their first trainee teacher that they've experienced or worked with. So they need to be able to support you in trying new things. But also, it is very nerve-wracking being a trainee teacher. You know, you might not have the confidence to stand up, or you might not yet have your teacher voice, and you know, you lose your voice by day, you know, 5 or something. So they need to be there to support you as well. And if you ever feel unsupported, then maybe just try and talk to them and say, you know, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed, would you mind taking this group quickly? Or I've written you a plan for this lesson, would you mind running these 2 groups, or doing this input or this plenary while I do some live marking? You know, just communication is the most important thing. And you know, there may be times where you're like, oh, I bet they are silently judging me right now, or oh, I'm really embarrassed I did that mistake. But we've all been there. You know, you're training, you're not expected to be perfect, otherwise, you know, you would just jump to your NQT year, and nobody does. So it's important to not beat yourself up for any mistakes, not feel judged, and really be open about gaining that support or what you need in your lesson. I was very easy to take it all on my shoulders, to the point where the TA would be like, oh, what do you want me to do? Knowing I was like rushed off my feet just because I was scared to ask her something. And that's not what you want. You really want to have a solid communication. And that kind of comes into the category of having good relationship with the children, but also with the members of staff that you work with. Question 4, what do you recommend buying in preparation for your PGCE? Now, there is a video that I did a while ago that was kind of optional prep and purchases that you could do beforehand. And, you know, I mentioned lots of different things. I mentioned things like the stationery, potentially, like highlighters and marking pens. But really, every single thing is optional. There is not a list that says you need a laminator and a printer and ink and whiteboards and whiteboard pens and reusable whiteboard erasers. There is no such list. It doesn't exist, because every single school has its own system. Every single school will be able to provide you with different things, or they might have different policies. It's really difficult to answer that. And so I want to just give a reassuring answer of, do not panic, you do not need anything. And if you do need something, you have always got the first weekend to go shopping and get some things. You know, you don't need to have a whole drawer full of stationery and different post-it notes and all of that kind of jazz, and most things you would have anyway. I'm sure most people have some spare paper or an old notepad somewhere that isn't started yet. So please do not panic. There is no right or wrong answer on what you need to buy. Some people recommend, you know, just saying like, oh, it was a lifesaver when I got a laminator because I didn't have to stay ages after school. But also it is money and we're not paid for this. So I don't want to put that pressure on you to make you feel like, hey, to be a good teacher, you need this, this and this, because you can be an awesome teacher without having bought any of that stuff. So I hope that helps. Things you wish you knew before starting. That's a good question. Things I wish I knew before starting. I would say, I wish I knew that COVID was going to hit. I think that's left us in a few tricky situations. I'm not sure what I wish I knew before starting. I'm really not sure how to answer that. I know things that I wish I would have learned in my PGCE, so I'll just tell you that anyway. I really wish I would have learnt more about assessments, because now, having just nearly finishing summer term 2, where it's all about assessments and updating Boxels and EHCPs, I did not get involved with any of that, not out of my own choice, during my training year. And so I kind of got there and I was like, oh my goodness, this is really difficult, this is really time consuming, I'm not sure what to write. And I don't think the training year prepares you. So if you have the opportunity to observe your mentor doing reports or to get involved, definitely do, because obviously that's a really big part of your teaching. That's teaching standard 6 about assessment. So get involved in that aspect of it, because I really was not prepared for it. And actually I did a poll on Instagram and I forgot to share the results, but at least 90% said they did not feel that they were prepared for report and assessments. Question 6. I haven't got enough fingers. Question 6. Any tips for balancing placement with assignments? Again, I have a video on assignments, but I will link it all below. But the biggest tip I would give to try and make this video nice and concise is start your assignments early. Because you cannot assume next week will be less busy than your current week. So even if you can get 10 minutes in a day, or just read an article a day so you have a reference list before you even start, something like that, that will help you so much. I did this and it helped me tremendously. So when it came to half term, I was making those little adjustments or taking out loads of words because I went over, or editing, that kind of thing. But then I know some of my SCITT colleagues, they actually started in half term and then they were stressed beyond, you know, imagination, is that the expression? They were stressed beyond anything because they had a week to write it, edit it, read it, and then they still had lesson plans to do for after half term finished. So half term is your time to try and relax a little bit, try and recover, recharge your battery, so you don't want to do that to yourself. So start as early as possible. Literally the moment you get that brief, start to brainstorm ideas of what you could write about, especially as some of mine were quite open to topics, so we had to think about what we wanted to write. So that would be my biggest tip. Don't leave it till half term or holidays. Start ASAP and do it in little chunks. Question 7, what was your planning system throughout your PGCE year? So this really depends on the school as well. Some people do kind of a weekly plan and very brief. Some people do full-on lesson plans. Some people don't do any lesson plans. So in terms of that, how the school does their planning, that can be different. In terms of what my SCITT expected, every single lesson they wanted a thorough lesson plan, and this really took its toll. And I think after maybe February, so it started in September, after about February, they said we only want to see lesson plans if you're having a lesson observation. So that cut the workload by a lot, because instead of writing a 3-page lesson plan for, you know, potentially 3 lessons a day, I would just do it when I had a lesson observation. But it was really good evidence, and it was really helpful when doing my teacher standards evidence folder. So try and do those for as long as possible, but once it's kind of okay and you've got the hang of it, talk to your mentor and see if they would be okay with you not doing one every time, because it takes ages. So I did do the plan. I have actually showed the template that I used for planning. I will also link that down below, and I kind of run through it with you guys so that you can see every box and how I would answer it. So hopefully that helps. In terms of planning a sequence of lessons, my biggest thing, I think, is starting from the objective I want them to be able to do and then work backwards. So say, okay, I want them to write a piece of persuasive text to a formal audience, I don't know, so then I would consider the different stepping stones they need, and that would be the learning intention for each lesson, essentially. Question 8. What are some of your favourite fellow primary teacher accounts that give helpful tips like yourself? So I really like 4 Teachers. She's got a YouTube channel and an Instagram account. She is currently teaching in Hong Kong, but she qualified and taught for a few years here first. She has lots of videos, again, like PGCE related, behaviour management related, as well as some of her own experiences, which I think is absolutely fabulous. There is also Tara's teaching. She is solely on Instagram, but she has lots of really helpful graphics and carousels which you can flick through, as well as some book recommendations and reviews. There is also on Instagram SCITT, NQT, SCITT with 2 T's, and she's really honest, and she kind of talks about her journey, as well as giving little tips on what she's kind of learned from her NQT year. So for example, she'll say, this was a really useful purchase, this was a total waste of time purchase. And if you're one of those people who are wondering about what to purchase, then those tips are just amazing for you, because they can easily look very aesthetically pleasing, but if they're not useful or they actually create more work, then it's good to know that in advance. Next question, do you get paid during the NQT years? Yes, thankfully. However, the NQT term is now changing to ECT, which stands for Early Career Teachers, which is now a 2-year induction period. Thankfully, the government have said, unless it has changed, but I don't believe so, there will still be a progression of payment between the first year of your ECT and the second year of your ECT. Final question from Instagram. What would you say is the most stressful part of the year and the most enjoyable? The most stressful part of the year, I think, is maybe that first week where you start to go to 50% teaching, and then once you've got used to 50%, then going to 80% teaching. I think that's quite stressful, because it's every single time it's a big leap, but it's all about getting into the flow of things, asking for support, communicating, and there's lots of different things you can do to reduce the workload as well, like live marking and, you know, not taking your marking home with you. I've got 10 marking tips that help reduce that workload, because that's one of the things that you can spend ages doing as a trainee teacher, you know, writing these really thorough comments, but you need to think about who you're marking for. Are you just marking for the school, for your own sake, or are the kids actually benefiting from this? Again, that does vary on the school, but that's just something to bear in mind. And then things like not having to create your own resources for every single thing, because it just takes too long. So, you know, test.co.uk is a brilliant website. Sometimes if I used like a bite-sized video to support, then I would just screenshot different parts of that video to put into my worksheet, for example. And also with challenges, you don't need to create a worksheet challenge every single time. It can just be a verbal challenge. So all those little things help with those big gaps from 50% to 80% teaching and so forth. The most enjoyable part is just, I think, those spontaneous learning opportunities where, you know, a child says something great and you're like, wow, what a great question, and you might go into a slight tangent, or the fun activities where you can, you know, let yourself go a little bit. There's no pressure of like writing something down, and the children really enjoy it. They're still learning to be done, but it's done in a more childlike, friendly manner. Do Do you know what I mean? So you just feel, it's where you get to enjoy the children really, rather than being a teacher. You get to enjoy them and be like, oh wow, you know, you guys have such great ideas, or I love what you did there. For example, things like drama or music, that's really nice. It's those moments that you kind of cherish. You don't think, you know, in 2 years time, oh, I love that piece of writing that X did about, I don't know, a persuasive letter to the headmaster. You think, oh, I remember when, I don't know, we were doing drama and they were being silly and we all ended up chuckling. Something like that. Those moments are really precious. Okay, on to Facebook now. I'm wary how long this video is currently standing at. I think it's like 20 minutes, so I'll try and wrap it up a little bit. How do they build up your workload? So what do you start doing and what should you be doing by the end? So when you first start, it is very much, like I said, observations, getting to know the children, watching the dynamic between your mentor and the children. If you are uni route, it will probably be lectures, seminars, things like that, really upping your subject knowledge. And then gradually you will start to get more and more involved in the lessons. At first, and this might vary, but at first your mentor might do the planning for you, go through it, and then you deliver it to make sure that it's still like a good lesson. And then you will start to plan and deliver the lesson, and then the percentage of how much you teach will gradually increase. So it might, you know, go from 5% to then suddenly 20%, or you know, with support, and maybe if you're like co-planning or teaching half the class, it might go straight to 50%. And then, you know, it will increase until you get to 80%. There is no point where you are expected to teach 100% of the time. So please do not panic about that. It's always a max of 80% because you are still entitled to time off during classes for assignment or planning, and then you have the normal PPA time as well. Last question is, how does it work on a day-by-day basis on placement? Do you get directed by your mentor on what tasks you need to do, or is it more based on initiative? I'm told it's more observational to begin with. Yep, so it is more observational to begin with. Afterwards, then like I said, you know, they might plan and you deliver, or you might want to plan and they deliver it, so you can see, oh, this is how they would do it. It is very flexible, but it is also a great learning curve. So don't be scared to ask your mentor, I would love to try this, or I would like to teach this subject this week. Is that okay? And communication is really important. If you have no ideas on what to plan or what to do for that lesson, just ask, and then you can maybe do it together and work as a team. I was going to say team target, but I think that means something different. Work as a team. But yeah, day by day, you know, you will just follow the normal class structure. I forgot the percentage because I was never very good at taking all of the time I was allocated out of class, but you do have time out of class, a certain amount of hours per week, you know, to do an assignment or to observe another teacher or another year group, because those kind of things are really important as well, because there's no guarantees when you get your job you will be in the exact same year that you trained in. So those things are really important, and then you get PPA time as well. So day by day, that's what happens. You might also be involved in things like after school clubs or break time duty. During my placement year, I volunteered to do a choir, which I absolutely loved after school. And occasionally I had break time duties as well. So that will be part of your day-to-day placement as well. I hope that has helped. I've spoken really quickly because I just wanted to get all of my ideas and thoughts just out to you on camera. Obviously, if there is anything that you wanted any more clarification on, please feel free to ask me down below. You can ask me any other questions as well, because I did leave the FAQ request a little late last night before I decided to do this video. But hopefully it helped and it kind of reassured you a little bit on things that you can do, things that you don't need to do, what to expect, and just try and enjoy your summer holidays, because it will be a stressful year, but you can do it, and I wish you all the best. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it to your friends or future SCITT colleagues, and subscribe for more teacher related content. I'll see you soon. Bye!